Elliot Graves had been driving the same subway line in New York City for nearly 17 years. The 7 line was predictable. Its passengers, its noise, even its mechanical groans through the tunnels had become part of his nervous system. But for the past 3 weeks, he had noticed something that didn't belong in that pattern. A teenage girl, likely around 15, always boarding near the end of his evening shift. She never spoke, never looked up, always sat alone in car 7 by the window. Same seat, same silence. Her eyes were glassy, her hands clutched a threadbare backpack like it contained her only lifeline. Something about her felt out of place, like she was from a different story that had bled into his tracks. The first time Elliot noticed her crying, he assumed it was city noise playing tricks on him. The low sobs came faintly through the cab intercom system, like a skipped frequency, half there and half imagined. But then it happened again, and again, always at the same moment, just as the train dipped into the stretch of dark tunnel between Willets Point and 111th Street. He checked the monitors. No one else seemed to hear it. No one even glanced in her direction. Stranger still, in the security footage, her seat appeared empty. It didn't make sense. How could someone be there but not show up on the feed? He asked a few regulars if they'd seen a girl matching her description. Blank stares. One woman thought he was joking. Another laughed and asked if he'd been working too many doubles. The more Elliot tried to verify her presence, the more invisible she became to everyone but him. And still, every evening, there she was, staring down at her lap, tears falling onto her jeans, and never uttering a single word. Elliot began breaking protocol. After his shift, he stayed back. He'd walk the length of the train before it shut down, especially car 7. One night, after she had exited like always at the last stop, he found her seat still warm. Condensation marked the window where her head had leaned. But what really caught his attention was something stuffed beneath the seat, a folded slip of paper, jagged along the edges. He opened it with trembling fingers. In shaky handwriting, it read, "I ride every day. No one hears me, but I know you see me." The breath caught in his throat. This wasn't in his head. He looked back at the seat. What he saw next made his entire body tense. A pair of old canvas shoes, too small for an adult, were just barely visible under the seat's shadow. Inside them, unmoving, were what looked like 2 child-sized feet. Elliot backed away instinctively, heart pounding. But when he blinked, they were gone, vanished. Yet the note was still in his hand, and the warmth on the seat hadn't faded. He turned towards the camera screen mounted in the corner of the car, and for the first time, there she was. Her face stared directly at him, not sad, not crying, but aware. And just as quickly as she had appeared, the feed blinked, and she was gone. Elliot didn't sleep that night. The girl's face on the monitor was burned into his mind. Pale, alert, and unmistakably aware of his presence. He replayed the footage again and again from the archived subway feed, but every time, it skipped directly past the exact second she had appeared. That single frozen frame was gone. No timestamp, no record. It was as if the system had chosen to forget her. The note, however, remained tangible. The paper smelled faintly of mildew and something else, like old wood and stagnant water. He kept reading the words, "I know you see me." It wasn't just a plea. It was a confirmation. She had been trying to reach someone, and for reasons he couldn't explain, She had chosen him. Somewhere inside, that realization lit a fuse Elliot thought had long been extinguished, the one that used to care. The next evening, he showed up to work early. He needed to see her again. And this time, he would not just observe, he would follow. Because what haunted him wasn't that she had vanished. It was the unshakable feeling that she hadn't gone far, just deeper, somewhere the train couldn't reach. He altered the lighting pattern in car 7 without authorization, dimming the fluorescence slightly so shadows would fall longer across the seats. If she showed up again, he wanted to see more. Details, movement, maybe even hear her voice. As passengers began to board, Elliot watched the cabin monitor closely. No sign of her, until 6:37, 1 minute before the tunnel dip. A blur moved into the corner of the frame. Then, there she was, same seat, same posture, but this time, her face was already wet with tears. Elliot's hands tightened around the control lever. The sobbing began again, more raw, almost ragged. But here's what was new. The passengers around her were reacting. A man looked over his shoulder, confused. A woman frowned and clutched her purse. For the first time, they saw her, or something. Elliot stared, barely blinking, as a chill began climbing his spine. At 6:42, the train emerged from the tunnel. The girl was gone, again. But this time, the other passengers began murmuring. One man approached Elliot at the next station and said, "Hey, was that kid okay?" She looked like she was shaking. Elliot didn't know what to say. He only nodded. But inside, his heart was racing. Something had changed. Her presence wasn't just a private vision anymore. It had bled into their shared reality. He stepped into car 7 during his break and found something that hadn't been there before. A small bracelet, pink with tiny plastic stars, tucked neatly into the seat crack. He picked it up carefully, as if it might scream. He recognized it from last night's camera image. She had worn it, which meant she had been here, physically. That terrified him more than if she were a ghost. Elliot took the bracelet home, wrapped in a handkerchief. He placed it gently on his kitchen table and sat in silence, staring at it for over an hour. The object seemed harmless, but the longer he looked, the more it unsettled him. It was too pristine, not dirty, not damaged, just out of place, like a memory pulled out of time and set down in the wrong world. When he finally picked it up again, he noticed something etched faintly on the inside. 3 initials, LMO. He froze. That was her. Lena. He didn't know how he knew her name, but it came like breath into lungs underwater. The memory, was it memory, flashed in his head. A news article months ago. Missing teen, dark hair, subway rat. He rushed to his old laptop and searched. And when her photo loaded on the screen, his hands began to tremble. Lena Marie Ortiz, 15, reported missing 6 months ago. Last seen boarding a 7-line subway train near Queensboro Plaza. The article said there were no leads, no sightings. But Elliot was sure. She was his girl. The same seat, the same crying, the note, the bracelet. All of it connected. But the part that rattled him most wasn't the discovery. It was what came next. On a private message board linked from the article, someone had posted 3 nights ago. The crying girl is still on the train. Someone help her, before she takes someone with her. That post had one reply, from an anonymous user. It read, "Too late. She's already chosen someone." Elliot sat back in his chair. The bracelet was gone from the table. Elliot tore through his apartment like a man possessed. The bracelet was gone. He hadn't left his chair, hadn't heard a sound, but it had vanished, as if Lena herself had come to reclaim it. His breathing turned shallow. He scanned the floor, the counters, even the trash, but there was no trace. Then his laptop chimed. An email, unknown sender, no subject. Inside was a single image, security footage of car 7, time-stamped that night, the moment before Lena disappeared. The frame showed her face again, but this time her mouth was open, eyes wide, staring not ahead, but directly at the camera. At him, his skin prickled with static. Beneath the image, a single line. She knows what you saw. And now, she's watching back. Elliot slammed the lid shut. His walls felt too thin. He wasn't just witnessing her story anymore. He was inside it. At work the next day, Elliot requested access to archived surveillance footage from the past 3 months. His supervisor resisted at first, but Elliot played the technical check card and was waved through. He loaded hours of train video, dozens of nights, hundreds of passengers. He fast-forwarded past the noise until he reached the time Lena usually boarded. Again and again, her seat remained empty, but sometimes, for just a single frame, her reflection would appear in the subway window, never on the seat, never on the cameras, but only in the glass, staring at something behind her. Elliot leaned in. There was always a shape in the reflection, not a person, more like a shadow, or something crouched low, close to her legs. It never moved, until one night it did, and then Lena's reflection blinked out for good. He printed the frame and took it to a retired MTA technician he trusted, Rodney, a man who had seen too many things and learned to keep quiet. Rodney looked at the photo for less than 5 seconds before standing up and locking the door. "This isn't the first time," he muttered. "Every 10 years or so, someone starts asking about the girl on the 7 line, and every time, she gets closer to whoever's looking." Elliot demanded answers, but Rodney shook his head. "I've lost 2 conductors this way, both found dead in their apartments. No sign of struggle, just eyes wide open, like they saw something they shouldn't have." He handed the photo back with trembling fingers. "If you want to survive, stop noticing her." But Elliot had already gone too far for that. That night, Elliot rode the train as a passenger for the first time in years. He sat in Lena's seat. It felt colder than the rest, as if chilled from the inside. Around him, passengers looked normal, unaware. But as the train neared the tunnel stretch, Elliot could feel it, air growing still, lights dimming more than usual. He looked out the window and saw himself reflected, then saw her, Lena, standing behind him, lips moving. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but it wasn't a cry. It was a warning. Suddenly, every light in the car flickered off. In total darkness, he felt something brush his neck, then a whisper, close and breathless. "You're not supposed to be here yet." When the lights snapped back on, Elliot was alone. The train was still moving. The passengers were gone. The car was empty, except for a child's drawing taped to the window. Crayon lines showed a subway car, a crying girl, and a shadow with too many arms. Scrawled beneath it in uneven letters were the words, "Let her go, or she stays forever." Elliot stared at it, pulse thundering. He wasn't just haunted, he was being given a choice, and someone, or something, was waiting for his answer. Elliot took the drawing home. He placed it under a lamp and studied the lines as if they might rearrange themselves into meaning. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to sprout from beneath the seat, wrapped in tendrils that curled around Lena's ankles. But what unsettled him most was the expression on her crayon face. Not fear, not pain, resignation, as if she had accepted being trapped. That night, Elliot couldn't stop dreaming of tunnels, dark, endless, breathing. In his dream, Lena stood at the far end of a car flooded in red emergency lights, pointing to something behind him. When he turned, he saw only track, no wall, no exit, just track. And then he heard the screeching approach of another train. He woke up gasping, soaked in sweat. The clock read 3:17 a.m. His phone buzzed with a voicemail. Unknown number. Static. Then a voice. I didn't want to stay. They made me. You saw me. That means you can end it. He called Rodney the next morning but got no reply. Out of unease, Elliot drove to Rodney's apartment in Queens. The door was ajar. Inside, no sign of struggle, no forced entry. But the living room TV was on, playing back the surveillance footage Elliot had brought. Lena's reflection looped again and again in that exact same frame. On the coffee table lay a single subway token and a crumpled note. She's stronger now. Don't ride tonight. Rodney was gone. Elliot knew in his bones that he wasn't coming back. That was the third person the girl had touched, but not harmed. At least not yet. She wasn't trying to kill them. She was trying to reach them before something else did. Elliot realized then, Lena wasn't the threat. She was the warning. Elliot returned to the MTA control center and accessed internal maintenance logs. He searched for anomalies, car malfunctions, unauthorized stops, electrical interference, anything out of pattern. Buried deep in a forgotten ticket from 6 months ago was a note from a janitor who had reported screams under the floorboards of car 7. The report was closed with no follow-up. Elliot tracked down the man, who now worked nights at Penn Station. The janitor, Manuel, looked shaken when Elliot showed him Lena's photo. I heard her, Manuel whispered. The first time, I thought it was rats. The second time, she begged me to help. Said, he won't let me go. I quit 2 days later. Elliot pressed for more, but Manuel clammed up. Before leaving, he handed Elliot a torn patch of fabric. Found it stuck under the floor hatch, not mine, not in a uniform. You want the truth? Look beneath the seat. Elliot took the patch. It was pink and stitched with the same initials, LMO. That evening, Elliot returned to the yard where decommissioned trains were stored. Car 7 had been pulled for repairs after an unrelated electrical surge. It was locked, but Elliot knew how to bypass the door from years of emergency drills. Inside, it was silent. No hum, no pressure in the air, just stillness. He sat in Lena's seat, waited. At 6:38, like clockwork, the cabin lights dimmed, and a clicking began under his feet. Not mechanical, rhythmic, almost like fingernails. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and crouched down. There, beneath the seat, was a panel he had never noticed. He pried it open with trembling hands. Inside, not wires, no tech, just dark, empty space. Then, from the void, a whisper. Find my name, find my truth, or he takes you too. And then something moved inside, something that wasn't her. Elliot stumbled back from the open hatch, slamming it shut as if it could contain whatever had stirred inside. He sat in the middle of car 7, gripping the torn patch with Lena's initials as the dark pressed in around him. The whisper hadn't sounded like her. It was deeper, fragmented, almost stitched together from voices that didn't belong. But Lena had spoken too. Find my name. Find my truth. That part haunted him. He had found her name, but not her truth. What did that mean? Was the missing girl not really who everyone thought? Or was there another story buried deeper, beneath the floorboards, beneath the headlines, beneath what the MTA had chosen to forget? Elliot knew the subway held secrets, but he hadn't realized some of them were still alive, still watching. He returned home and started digging through public records, missing persons, juvenile arrests, transit accident reports. He filtered by age and area, females, 13 to 16, within the last year. One file stood out, a sealed juvenile case labeled Ongoing Mental Health Supervision, name redacted, but the report mentioned Queensboro Plaza and repeated attempts at platform trespass. The image was blurry, but he recognized her instantly. Lena. Except the date wasn't 6 months ago. It was 4 years ago. Elliot's blood ran cold. If Lena had vanished 4 years ago, who filed the missing persons report just recently? Who posted her photo online? Someone was manipulating the timeline. Or worse, someone wanted her to stay forgotten until it was too late. Elliot called the number listed on the original missing persons flyer. A woman answered. Soft voice, guarded tone. Hello. Elliot introduced himself, careful not to say too much. I drive the 7 line. I think I've seen your daughter. The line went dead silent. Then the woman replied, I don't have a daughter. Confused, he double-checked the number. This is the Ortiz residence, right? She paused. It was. We moved. Years ago. After the accident. Elliot's chest tightened. What accident? Her voice dropped to a whisper. There was no subway report. They covered it up. But I heard it. The brakes failed. The emergency doors jammed. She was caught under the train. They never recovered her. They said it was impossible. The line clicked off. Elliot sat frozen. The girl crying on his train hadn't gone missing. She had died. And the system buried it, literally. The next day, Elliot went to an old train operator who had retired early, Jack Redding. Rumor said Jack left after seeing something on the 7 line. Elliot showed him Lena's photo. Jack turned pale. I told them it wasn't mechanical. I told them something was inside that car. They laughed, so I left. Jack grabbed Elliot's arm. She's not just haunting that seat. She's held there by what killed her. The system doesn't malfunction like that unless something wants it to. He handed Elliot a faded operator's manual with handwritten notes. Check the maintenance access logs. There's a name that doesn't appear in any MTA file. Hector Malloy. He was the one working that night. He vanished the next day. No obituary. No transfer. Just gone. Jack leaned in. If you find him, you'll find the thing that took her. Elliot spent that night scrolling through MTA archives until his eyes burned. He finally found it. One log entry from the night of Lena's death. Emergency brake override. Manual disengage. Operator H. Malloy. He checked Hector's employee record. It ended the next day with one chilling note. Transferred to internal investigation. Unresolved. But no department was listed. Elliot felt something click together in his mind, like 2 rail lines merging. Lena's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was orchestrated. And the thing holding her in car 7, he was still there. Still feeding, still waiting for the next technical error. Elliot looked at the photo of Lena one last time, and now He didn't just see grief. He saw urgency. She wasn't crying anymore. She was warning him. Elliot stared at the final log entry from Hector Malloy. The override of the emergency brake, manual, not automatic. A deliberate action, but what shook him more was that no one had flagged it. No disciplinary file, no follow-up. It had simply disappeared, just like Malloy. He printed out the log and took it to the MTA's underground archive vault in Long Island City. The clerk on duty, an old-timer named Felix, squinted at the paper, then silently led Elliot to a dusty row of case folders. "You didn't get this from me," Felix murmured, then vanished into the elevator. Elliot opened the box labeled HM7. Inside were torn maintenance blueprints, a blood-stained work badge, and a file labeled Incident Cavity, Access Level Below B. The blueprints showed something that didn't exist on any public diagram, an undocumented maintenance crawl space beneath Car 7's track segment. A space not for people, but something else. At the bottom of the file, handwritten in red ink, Malloy entered at 02.19, screaming heard at 02.23, signal lost at 02.25, hatch sealed 02.26. Elliot felt something tighten in his gut. Whatever was down there wasn't just mechanical. It wanted to be sealed. And now it was reaching up again. Determined to see it for himself, Elliot returned to the Queen's Tunnel stretch with stolen access codes. Just before 2 a.m., he activated a maintenance override and stepped off the train as it slowed into emergency mode. Wearing a flashlight clipped to his vest, he climbed down the gravel side ledge, heart pounding as he reached the hidden hatch marked faintly with the number HMB. The metal was warped. The bolts rusted over like something had tried to claw out. He pried it open slowly, flashlight beam piercing down into black nothing. The air smelled foul, wet copper, and something older, something rotting. He descended carefully into the space. It wasn't a crawl space, it was a corridor. Cracked tiles, broken utility pipes, and in the center, a rusted maintenance chair still bolted to the floor. On the wall, smeared in what looked like oil or blood, a single word, stay. Then his flashlight flickered. In the darkness, Elliot heard something skitter, then scrape, then breathe. It wasn't human. Too wet, too uneven. He held his breath, backing slowly toward the hatch. But before he reached it, the corridor lights, long dead, blinked on for a single second. And in that instant, he saw it. A mass of limbs, stretched like roots, eyes where eyes shouldn't be, and in the center of the pulsing shape, Hector Malloy's ID badge fused to something resembling a torso. The lights went dark again. Elliot scrambled up the ladder, slamming the hatch shut above him. Whatever Lena had been trying to show him, it lived there, and it wasn't finished. Not with her, not with Hector, and now, not with him either. The next morning, Elliot sat in his car outside the MTA's safety board office, replaying the footage from his helmet cam. But when he reached the moment the creature appeared, static, just like before, it had erased itself. The only thing that remained was audio. A girl's voice, clear and terrified. They buried it. With him. With me. Now it wants you. Elliot turned off the recorder, hands shaking. He understood now why Lena had cried for so long. She wasn't just trapped in the train. She was trapped with it. A silent passenger to something ancient and hungry. And the longer she remained unseen, the stronger it grew. The system's silence wasn't an accident. It was complicity. Elliot tried to report what he'd found, bringing the maintenance files and Hector's access logs to his supervisor. But the man barely looked at them. Old rumors, fabricated notes, let it go. When Elliot pressed, he was taken off his route, pending evaluation. They called it stress, gave him a number for a counselor. But later that day, his employee portal was locked. His keycard disabled. They were shutting him out, sealing the truth again, just like they had sealed that hatch. But Elliot wouldn't stop. That night, on a burner laptop, he uploaded a hidden message to a forum of subway workers. If you hear the girl cry, listen. If she looks at you, follow. But never, never look under her seat alone. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be freed. Elliot went off the grid. After being locked out of the MTA system, he abandoned his apartment and moved into a rundown motel near the East River. There, using a backup drive of Lena's appearances, Hector's override logs, and his helmet audio, he began assembling a timeline. It wasn't just haunting. It was repeating. Every time the subway entered that tunnel at 6:38, the same events occurred. Flickering lights, an unexplained dip in power, and Lena's reflection. But something new had started. In the last two ride recordings, Lena's face had shifted. She no longer looked at the camera. She looked just beside it, at something else. Her expression, once grief-stricken, was now tense, urgent, as if counting down. Elliot realized with horror the entity wasn't bound by place. It was bound by pattern. And the pattern was nearing its final cycle. Elliot knew he couldn't stop this alone. He contacted Manuel, the janitor who once heard the screams under the floorboards. At first, Manuel refused to speak, but when Elliot showed him the audio clip of Lena's voice, something broke. "My cousin disappeared on that line in '97, Manuel whispered. "She used to talk about a girl too," said the shadows moved in the glass. They met in secret inside an abandoned switching station beneath Court Square. There, Manuel handed Elliot a journal filled with maintenance irregularities dating back 30 years, all linked to Car 7. "They moved the number," he said. "But it's always the same car." Elliot flipped through dates, blueprints, technician deaths, even suicides. One phrase repeated again and again: "Passenger doesn't disembark." Elliot finally understood. The MTA hadn't hidden the entity to protect passengers. They'd hidden it because they couldn't kill it, only feed it. They hatched a plan. Manuel knew of an old maintenance conduit beneath 111th Street, one that connected directly to the track segment housing Car 7's route. It had long been sealed, but with the right equipment, Elliot could force an entry point. If they could rewire the cabin's power to surge at the exact time Lena appeared, 6:38, they might disrupt the entity's hold, maybe even release her. It was a long shot, dangerous, and illegal. But Elliot no longer cared. Lena had been crying long enough. He purchased industrial batteries, spliced wiring tools, and a personal generator. That night, Elliot stood beside the tracks. Just before the crawlspace hatch, heart pounding. He checked the watch, 6:36. Then he heard it, the faintest sob drifting down the tunnel like a memory trying to survive. At 6:38, the train entered the tunnel. Elliot triggered the generator. Sparks flew. The lights in Car 7 exploded with brightness. Through the access window, he saw her, Lena, standing in the aisle, arms outstretched, eyes wide. But something else emerged behind her, a shape, uncoiling, furious. The train screeched to a halt. Elliot ran forward and climbed aboard, power still surging through the circuits. In that moment, Lena turned to him. For the first time, she wasn't crying. She mouthed the words, "Now." Elliot slammed the manual override, forcing the emergency doors open. He grabbed her wrist, cold, but solid. He pulled, and as her feet crossed the threshold, the entity screamed so loud the windows cracked. Then the lights went black. When the lights returned, Lena lay unconscious in his arms. The car was empty. No passengers, no entity, just silence. Manuel called out from the track, "Did you do it?" Elliot couldn't answer. He only stared at Lena, her eyes flooded open. "Where am I?" she asked. And in that moment, Elliot felt it. A shift in the air, like something had unhooked from time. She was free, but something else had broken loose in the process. Lena was alive, but changed. Elliot saw it immediately. Her eyes didn't dart with fear anymore. They were calm, too calm, as if she had seen something no one else had, and made peace with it. She clutched his sleeve with trembling fingers. "You shouldn't have pulled me out," she whispered. "It needed a door." Elliot stared at her, stunned. "You were trapped." But Lena shook her head slowly. "I was the lock." That sentence echoed in Elliot's mind like a dropped wrench in an empty tunnel. He had freed her, but in doing so, he had unsealed whatever the entity truly was. The subway rumbled again beneath them, more than a passing train. It was deeper, a movement in the system itself, as if something was stretching for the first time in years. Lena looked towards the tunnel, her voice nearly gone. "It's awake now, and it remembers you." In the following days, the MTA experienced an unprecedented wave of failures, circuit malfunctions, power surges, security blackouts, centered only on the 7 line. Trains stalled inside tunnels for minutes at a time, passengers reporting strange smells, flashes of movement in the glass, or the distant sound of sobbing. Elliot, now officially suspended, monitored it all from Manuel's basement. Lena refused to speak much, often sitting in silence by the heater, drawing the same shape again and again, a circle with teeth. Elliot tried to reach out, to ask what she remembered, but every time she answered, her voice echoed unnaturally, like a second tone layered just beneath. The entity hadn't died. It had shifted. Lena was no longer its prisoner, but she may have become its vessel. One night, Lena stood in front of Elliot holding one of her drawings. "You need to go back," she said. "Not to save me, to trap it again." Elliot hesitated. "How?" She knelt beside a toolkit and removed a folded schematic, the maintenance corridor beneath the 7 line. But this version was different. It showed a second chamber, deeper than the hatch he had entered. A room marked only as Transit Route A. Lena touched it gently. "That's where it feeds. You have to seal it from there. Not with locks, with light." Elliot understood. The entity lived in dark repetition, in ritual. To fight it, he had to shatter the pattern, interrupt it, expose it. He packed the generator again, added 2 halogen flood lamps, and asked Manuel for one last favor. "Get me on the 7 line, as close to the stretch between 111th and the dead zone as you can. I'm ending this." At 2:17 a.m., Elliot entered the tunnel once more, this time alone. The air was heavier. The rails vibrated faintly, as if aware of him. He reached the hatch and descended deeper than before, crawling past the corridor into a second cavity. It wasn't made of metal. It was carved, concrete giving way to earth, walls etched with claw-like markings. the ground scattered with shredded clothing, lanyards, rusted name tags, and at the center, a throne-like structure built of rebar and bone. The entity's core, it pulsed with heat and a strange low hum, like distant voices looping in reverse. Elliot positioned the floodlights and aimed them directly at it. Then he waited. The hum rose to a scream. The walls trembled. The entire structure seemed to recoil. Elliot closed his eyes and flipped the switch. The lights roared to life, white, violent, blinding. Something shrieked, not in pain, but in fury. The ground cracked. Elliot felt himself lifted, thrown backward. Then, silence. When he woke up, the lights were shattered, the chamber gone, just dust and stone, and in his hand, clutched tight, was Lena's bracelet, warm. Elliot emerged from the tunnel alone, bruised and coated in tunnel ash. It was almost sunrise, and the city outside seemed unaware of the confrontation buried beneath its streets. He limped through the MTA yard and collapsed into Manuel's van parked nearby. Manuel stared at him, wide-eyed. "It's done?" Elliot nodded weakly. "It's buried again." But as they drove away, Lena, who had remained in the van, spoke softly without turning her head. "You buried it, but it left its voice behind." Elliot froze. "What voice?" Lena looked at him then. "Yours." That night, as Elliot lay trying to sleep, his dreams were not his own. He saw passengers, past and present, sitting in car 7, looking out windows that now showed no tunnels, only darkness and flickers of movement. And he heard it, his voice, repeating the phrase, "You saw me, now I see you," over and over again. Over the next several days, the disturbances stopped. No flickering lights, no crying. Car 7 was finally decommissioned, taken off rotation, and sealed in a scrapyard. MTA called it a safety hazard, quietly erased the route segment from the digital map. Elliot watched the news, but no mention was made. It was as if none of it happened. But workers knew. Manuel told him that a few conductors had refused to return to the 7 line altogether. Others reported sleep paralysis, hearing sobs in empty cabins, and waking to find strange symbols scratched into the control panels. One operator found his monitor displaying footage of himself, but from behind, though he had been alone. Elliot realized the entity hadn't been destroyed. It had just dispersed, scattered into echoes, and every time someone remembered Lena or spoke of the cries in car 7, it reassembled a little more. Lena was changing too. She smiled more now, but never for long. Her drawings had shifted, from monsters to mirrors, train windows mostly. One morning, Elliot noticed her reflection didn't move in sync with her. She turned left. It turned late. She blinked. It didn't. When he asked if she was okay, she replied, "I'm not alone anymore." Elliot tried to reach her, but she closed off, retreating behind the same silence he'd seen when she first appeared. Manuel warned him, "You pulled her out of its world, but some part of it stayed with her, maybe even through her." That night, Elliot placed a recorder in Lena's room. In the middle of the night, it captured her voice whispering to the dark, "You let me go. Now I carry him forward." The voice that answered was not hers. Elliot knew the pattern was reforming. The entity didn't need a tunnel. It needed a rhythm, a ritual, a route. So he created his own. Every night, at 6:38, he returned to the old car 7 scrap site, walked through the yard, and stood in front of its rusted shell. As long as he showed up, as long as the pattern looped around him, he could contain it. He became the echo trap. Lena stopped drawing after that, but she watched him every evening, eyes wide, lips parted, as if waiting for something to fail. And deep inside the train, one window remained clean. No dust, no cracks, just glass, perfect for reflection. The last time Elliot stood there, he reached out and touched the side of car 7. A vibration pulsed beneath his fingers. He leaned in, listening. Nothing. Then a whisper, his own voice. "You should never have looked under the seat." He stepped back. The sky was darkening, and behind the glass, a figure sat quietly. Not Lena, not Hector, someone else entirely, watching. Rain fell hard the next evening. Elliot stood alone at the yard again, facing car 7 like a man revisiting a grave he helped dig. The air was thicker now, charged with something he couldn't name. Lena hadn't spoken in 2 days. Her eyes remained alert, but distant, watching shadows more than people. Tonight felt different. The window on car 7 was fogged from the inside, and this time, a faint tapping came from behind the glass. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more, a code. Elliot stepped closer. Instinct warring with fear, he pressed his hand against the door. A low vibration traveled up his arm. Then a hiss, air pressure releasing. The door creaked open by itself, lightless, waiting. He stepped inside. The cabin was covered in frost. His breath became mist. But the seat, her seat, was warm. On it sat a single item, a black notebook. Inside, page after page of handwriting he didn't recognize, but with one recurring sentence. "She cried so we wouldn't forget. Now she watches so we don't repeat." Then, on the final page, a sketch, a mirror, and behind it, not Lena. Him, but older, broken, caught mid-scream. Elliot dropped the book. The train rumbled under his feet, but it didn't move. The world did. Suddenly, Elliot was no longer in the scrapyard. He stood on a moving train. Car 7, restored, pristine, but empty. The lights were dimmed, and across from him sat a boy, 9 or 10, staring blankly out the window. The boy turned. "You see it too?" Elliot tried to answer but couldn't speak. His reflection wasn't in the glass, only the seat behind him, empty. Until it wasn't. Something rose slowly, crawling, familiar. The boy blinked. "It knows your name now." The train lights flickered, then everything went black. The next morning, car 7 was found sealed again, welded from the outside. Lena was gone. So was Elliot. Only the recorder remained, resting on the seat. It played back a single looped phrase every time someone pressed play. "She cried alone so none of us would be, but someone always looks under the seat." The MTA burned the records, scrapped the footage, but the pattern began again on a different line. Different car, same time. The thing beneath the seat had moved on, and this time it knew what fear felt like. Passengers who ride late-night trains now report odd feelings near car 3 or car 5, depending on the night. Some say they hear crying. Others feel a cold breath on the back of their neck. A few have seen a girl with long hair mouthing words through the window, but no one hears her, not unless they're meant to, and if they're ever brave or foolish enough to look beneath the seat, they don't come back to tell what they saw. The train keeps running, and so does the silence. If this story made you think twice about your next subway ride, don't leave without sharing it. Stories and Shadows brings you mystery stories like this one, uncovering the haunted, the hidden, and the voices that refuse to be silenced. There's more waiting in the dark, and every click helps us bring those tales to light. like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stop. And if you ever hear someone crying alone on the train, don't look under the seat. Just keep moving, because not all passengers are meant to get off.